Hi everyone! Welcome to Planty Craft channel. Today I'm going to show you how to make a giant grape hyacinth style paper flower. Let's start with a quick overview of the materials and tools. We'll be using white hand crumpled paper for the flower bulbs. You can dye this paper into any color you like. For the leaves, we'll use green florin paper and green crepe paper. 3 sizes of foam bulb templates. Templates for the leaves and the stems. Just cut along the printed lines. For glue, we'll use white glue. You'll also need balloons, rubber bands, and a small air pump. For color, I'm using blue paint as an example. The process is the same for any other color. This is for painting the bottom of the bulbs. Brush. Prepare a few containers for mixing paint. Larger bowls or tubs work best. Clear tape, 18-gauge floral wire, and a base. To foam half spheres. And an aluminum plastic tube for the stem. Tools, awls, a craft knife, pliers, scissors, and hot glue guns. First, let's carve the foam bulbs. Before you start, wrap some clear tape around the joint between the blade and the handle of your craft knife. This makes it easier to hold and a little safer to use. Here's what foam looks like after carving. Now I'll show you how to carve. Start at the top of the foam ball and carve downward. Keep an eye on the pressure and angle. Tilt the knife slightly. Be careful not to cut your hands. Carve out one opening. Then rotate the ball and carve an opening on the opposite side. You can make the second opening slightly larger and carve a bit farther down. That's it for a small bulb. All of the foam bulbs are carved in the same way. For quantities, here's a guideline. About 11 small bulbs, 20 medium bulbs, and 8 large bulbs. You can feel free to add or reduce bulbs as you build the flowers. Next, we'll add wire. Cut one long piece of wire into 2 shorter pieces. I've already done that here. Take one piece and bend a small hook at one end. Pick up a foam bulb and pierce through the center of the base with the straight end of the wire. Try to go right through the middle of the bottom. Pull the wire down so the hook stays hidden inside the bulb. You can pull with a bit of force to make it tight. This helps keep the bulb secure on the wires. Repeat this process for all of the bulbs, gently tightening each one as you go. Pulled with a bit of force. Make it tight. Once all the bulbs are wired, we'll prepare the hand crumpled paper. The original sheet is quite large. I've already cut some pieces from it. I'll use the small bulb as an example. The other sizes follow the same cutting method. Place the template on the paper and fold the paper horizontally. Keep the width the same, around 70 centimeters, folding until the height of the folded pieces. Just a little taller than your template. Unfold it. Cut along the folding lines to get strips of paper. Use the template again to guide the next folds and cuts. Fold it. If you don't have a template, you can simply cut the paper into a rough square. As long as the bulb can sit in the center and the paper can wrap all the way around, the size is fine. With a template, you can trim away excess paper for a cleaner shape. You can also stack several sheets together and cut them at once to save time. Cut them at once to save time. And that's it. Cut all 3 sizes of paper, small, medium, and large, and set them aside. If you're working without templates, just judge by the size of your bulb and cut a piece that can wrap around it comfortably. Here's a quick way to size the paper without a template. Place the bulb in one corner of the paper. Then gather the paper up from the bottom to wrap around it. Check that the paper is slightly taller than the bulb. Fold the paper over. Press to create a crease. And cut along that line. Cut along. Once the height feels right, fold along the diagonal to form 2 triangles and trim along the edges. Fold along the diagonal to form 2 triangles. Cut it. Unfold it. You'll have a shape close to a square that fits the bulb nicely. Before we dye the paper, it's best to test the color with a small amount of paint. That way you can adjust without wasting materials. Protect your table with scrap paper or a plastic sheet. Pour water into your container and add some white glue. Stir until it's well mixed. For dyeing bulbs and paper, you can use this ratio as a reference. About 250 milliliters of water with roughly 1 bottle of glue. Just for reference. It doesn't need to be too thick. There's no fixed rule for how much paint to add. Adjust according to how light or dark you want the flowers to be. If you prefer a deeper color, simply add more paint. You can start by mixing a small amount of color, like I'm doing here. Then test it on one piece and let it dry. Check the drying results to see whether the shade matches what you have in mind. If it's too light, add more paint next time. If it's too dark, reduce the paint. Try not to mix a huge batch of water and paint on your first attempt. It's easy to waste materials that way. Once your color is ready, set the container aside for a moment. Take a piece of paper and use the awl to poke a small hole in the center. Place the paper into the water of a little to make it wet. This helps the color go on more evenly. gently wringing out the excess water. Unfold it. Lay the paper flat on the table. Brush on a thin layer of color using light strokes. Work in thin layers and build up slowly. You can wear gloves for this step if you like. Once the top side is painted, flip the paper over. Make a hole in the center. Now bring all four sides of the paper towards the middle. As you gather the paper, use your left-hand fingers to hold it in place. And use your right hand to keep pulling the edges inward. Grab one side, pull it toward the center, and hold. Then grab the opposite side and pull it in the same way. Pay attention to the bottom. Try to keep it as smooth as possible without large wrinkles. Continue around the paper until everything is wrapped. If you see big folds, open the paper, smooth it out, and wrap again. You can use a bit of upward pressure when you pull, so the paper hugs the bulb more tightly. Pinch the top to secure everything. Then tuck any extra paper into the gaps around the bulb. Refine the outline. That completes one small wrapped bulb. If you feel the color is too light, you can add another layer of paint. Keep in mind that the color will look much lighter after it dries. So it's okay to paint a little darker than you think you need. Let's wrap another one. Wet the paper with the remaining water. Squeeze out the extra water. And brush on a base layer of color. Flip the paper. Find the center hole and slide it over the bulb. Again, use your left hand to secure the paper while your right hand pulls the edges in. It's not okay in this place. Make it again. Check out the bottom. It's smooth, so it's good. Let's make it tighten. Tuck any extra paper into the gaps around the bulb. If there's too much paper at the top and it's hard to push into place, trim away a bit with scissors. After wrapping, you can paint again. Some bulbs can be darker, some lighter, to create variety. For deeper colors, simply repeat the painting process several times. Or mix a separate batch of paint that's a shade darker and use that on selected bulbs. Paint it. You can paint the entire bulb in one color. or create gradients. For example, darker at the top and lighter at the bottom, or the other way around. Work in thin layers and let the colors blend naturally. You can also experiment with different shades of blue. Feel free to color it any way you wish.
同理，我想下面颜色深，下浅。同样，我想下面颜色深，上面浅，也是一样的，直接深色，取深的颜料。
Working in thin layers.
多次。
Painted. That finishes the coloring step for the bulbs. You can use different colors. That finishes the coloring step for the bulbs. Next, we'll prepare the balloon pieces. Use a balloon and inflate it with the air pump. Don't make it too big. If the balloon is oversized, the paper won't be able to wrap around it. Don't make it too big. The paper for the balloons has already been cut. The method is similar to the bulb paper. Place the balloon in the center of the paper. Bring up the edges and check that the paper is slightly taller than the balloon. If it can't wrap all the way, the balloon is too big and you need to let out some air. Once you're happy with the size, tie off the balloon. Tie up. To cut the balloon paper, start with one large sheet and divide it into 8 smaller pieces. Each one will wrap one balloon. We'll dye these pieces as well. This time, increase the amount of glue in your mix. About twice as much glue as you used for the foam bulbs. More glue will make the dried paper stiffer and stronger. Add more glue. Color is adjusted in the same way, based on your preference. The steps are all the same. Wet the paper fully, wring it out. Unfold it. Brush on the color. You can also skip the base color and simply use clear water to soften the paper. Then wrap the balloon directly. Place the balloon in the center and bring up all sides of the paper. Check if the paper can fully wrap around the balloon. If it doesn't cover it completely, the balloon is too big. Let out a little air until it fits snugly. As you pull the paper around the balloon, use your left hand to press down on the balloon and hold it steady. While your right hand gathers small sections of paper toward the top, move around the balloon, pulling in and fixing each section as you go. Wash the bottom and try to keep the folds small and even. If you see small gaps or areas with less paper, it's okay. Just keep wrapping until the balloon is covered. Keep wrapping.
展开之后，
refine the outline.
尽
Try
量
to
把这些
smooth out the
褶皱
wrinkles
整理
as much as
平整一点。
possible. Check it over. Once it's fully wrapped, secure the top with a rubber band, wrapping it 2 or 3 times.
固定住。
Now
再
you
上
can
颜色，
paint
同样
again.
这个颜色
Want a
大家自己
softer
定，想
color?
浅一点就
Use
少颜料。
less paint.
想它
Want
深
a
一点
deeper
就增一
color?
些颜料，
Add more paint
再
to
加
your
一些颜料
mix.
进去。
You
也是
can
一样
dye
的，
these
你
balloon
也可以
shells
把它
as
染成
solid
渐变
colors
色或
or
者一类颜色，
gradients.
大家自己
It's
定。
entirely up to you. Build up the color gradually.
涂抹。
Coating the
这些也要
outside
涂抹
in
到。
thin layers. And don't forget to paint the inner supporting areas if you plan to use them in the structure.
往后期要用作它支撑里面。
The
可以散开
inside needs
这一层可
color
以涂也可以
too.
不用涂，根据自己的实际情况做。
Once a balloon shell is painted, you can gently open it out and lay it flat on the floor or a large surface to dry
地面上这
completely.
样放好，
Let it
让它
dry
自然干透。
completely.
完全干透之后修剪形状，把这个镶
When
在
it's
这里。
fully dry, trim the shape. Cut off the rubber band. Open the bottom slightly. You don't need to open it all the way, just enough to reach the edges.
给它展开一些。
Trim a neat ring around the bottom edge.
修剪掉一部分。
That should do
就
it.
差不多了，或
Or
者
you can cut it more.
修剪精细一点，
If you want petal shapes, cut a small notch on one side of the rim and another notch directly
再剪
opposite.
条线，为了更
Cut the shape.
就剪个弧度出来。
Like this. This divides the circle
它的
into
对面
two
这里
halves.
有一个，就把这一个圆给它分成了两半，
Then
然后把
divide
这
each half
一
into
半
3 equal sections.
再把它平均分成3等份，这样，剪，分成3份，
And cut each section into a soft curved petal shape.
修一下，修剪出一个弧度，像一个花瓣的形状。
This is a petal. You'll end up with 3 large petals.
是一样的。
If you find this step too time-consuming, you can skip the petal cutting and simply trim the edges into a smooth circle.
你可以不用剪，直接把这个边缘修掉，一整圈下来。
The other side is the same way.
再把它分成3份，
Cut the petal
剪出花
shape.
瓣的形状。
The finishing effect. Once all the balloon shells are trimmed, release the air from the balloon.
剪破， 这样就可以了。
Now we'll attach wires to these large hollow bulb shells.
这个花苞上
Use pliers to cut your wire into 2 parts.
分成2部分，来剪断。
On one end, bend the wire into a small coil. Loop it around itself a few times and tuck the long end inside.
绕过来，
Then pinch it tight with the pliers.
往里面收，
Keep blending it, then make it stand up. You want the top of the wire to be relatively flat, so it can support the bud.
支撑这个花苞。
Prepare for rounds of paper discs. These are cut from scrap paper left over from trimming the bulbs. Any rough circle will work. Take 3 discs and glue them together with the hot glue gun.
热好了之后，
Then apply hot glue onto the coiled wire and press the layered discs onto it.
3张重叠在一起。
Take out the wire to cover the coil and glue around the edges to secure it. Press the layered discs onto it.
压在这上面，
Slide the remaining disc onto the wire to cover the coil and glue around the edges to secure it.
盖住铁丝，同样给这个边缘位置打一些胶固定。
Use the awl to poke a hole in the center of the large shell at the bottom.
找到这个球的中心点，给它戳一个小洞。
Insert the wire from underneath and pull it through.
拉到这儿了，
Apply glue around the hole at the
这个下端位置
bottom.
打胶。
Here can add more glue. Then push the paper disc up into the bud, using your thumb to widen the opening and work the disc inside.
大拇指把这个底坡快速的
Pull the shell down firmly so it sits snugly against the disc.
带一下。
Adjust the opening so it's slightly smaller and more refined.
可以给它缩小一点。
Check it over. If some areas are caved inward, use another piece of wire to gently push them out, so the shell looks full and rounded.
整理一下。
Next, we'll assemble the grape hyacinth flower head. Start with the wired small bulbs. We'll work in layers.
先取一个，
The very top layer uses a single small bulb. Place it in the center and use clear tape to help fix it in place. For the second layer, the bulbs should sit slightly lower than the first. Hold the wires together at the bottom and secure them with tape.
稍微固定一下。
Use about 4 small bulbs in a circle for the second layer. Make it in a circle, adjusting the wire shapes as you go. You can adjust it as you like.
调整弯曲。
The third layer uses 6 small bulbs around the
这
circle.
样一圈围绕过来。
Lightly bend the wires outward to create a gentle
同样
curve.
把铁丝微微往外弯曲一下。
The fourth layer
第四
uses
层用个中好
6
花苞
medium bulbs. The
第五
fifth
层
layer
同样还
also
是6个
uses 6. And the
第六
sixth
层
layer uses 8.
8个。
Since the
这个方法比较
construction
简
is
单，
identical,
就不
I'll
一
skip
一
the
给大家演
repetition
示了。
here.
大
Feel
家
free to put them
自己
together
把
on
它
your
组合好。
own. The
第
seventh
7
layer
层
moves into
用到
large
大号
bulbs,
花苞
about 8
8个，
pieces.
这
Because
太重
these
了
are
你就可以
heavier,
把它放
you
在桌
can
面
rest
上，
the flower heads on the table while you
这
work.
样刮一下，
Press
让它
and
有一个弯
rotate
曲
gently to create a smooth curve.
的弧度，还是一样，也拉紧，这样慢慢旋转过来。
As you build each layer, pick the flower up and look at it from different angles.
不同角度的看，我们组合的时候要把它拿起来，这样看。
From the front, side, and top, so the overall cone shape feels balanced and natural. After the solid bulbs are in place, add the larger buds near the bottom to give
然后之前
extra
我可以把这
volume.
个铁丝给它弯曲一
Before
下
attaching these, bend the wires slightly to follow the curve of the stem. The seventh layer uses about 7
用到这
pieces.
个空的大花苞，
The assembly process is the same for all of them. This is the seventh layer. We use 7 buds. Add 2 more layers with roughly 8 to 9 buds. You can assemble them yourselves. This is the final result. Trim any wire that feels too long so the base looks neat.
过长的可以给它修剪整齐一点。
Now take the green crepe paper, fold it twice to make it narrower.
它折叠2次，变窄一点。
And cut a long strip horizontally. Make sure you rake cutting along the width,
你是这样
not
横
the
着剪的
length.
不要剪错了。
Unfold the strip. And
然后
start
把下
wrapping
端
it around the wires at the bottom.
用遮纹纸
Wrap it. You can secure the beginning with a little white glue or by pulling the crepe paper tight.
这样，
Keep wrapping. At the end, add a small amount of glue to fix it in place. And with that, the giant grape hyacinth flower head is
花
finished.
头参考一下。
Next, we'll create the large bulb at the bottom. Use your templates to cut the large buds, cutting it with templates.
卷好。
Cut hand crumpled paper into 3 sizes, small, medium, and large. The small pieces will wrap the top area, medium pieces wrap the middle, and large pieces wrap the bottom. We'll use about 3 to 4 pieces in each size. This is used for the bottom.
3到4片。
Coloring is similar to before. Add water to your container. Squeeze in the paint. Squeeze into the container. And brush a base color over each piece.
这个比较简单。
And this will be fine. And the base color is finished. If you want gradients along the edges, dip your brush in a bit more paint.
颜料，保存那个边缘。开。
And gently blend from the rim inward, pulling the color down with soft strokes to create a smooth transition. Treat all remaining pieces in the same way and let them dry. Next, let's make the base for our flowers. We'll need a large foam sphere. Take one foam half sphere and cut it in half. Find the center in the half foam. Cut it down. To keep your cut straight, you can draw a guideline around the center before you cut. Set these pieces aside and pick up the other full half sphere. Place the aluminum plastic tube on top and press down firmly to leave an impression. We'll carve a round hole where that mark is. So the tube can pass through later. Once the hole is carved, take one of the smaller foam pieces we cut earlier and place it on top as a cap. Carve a matching hole in this top piece and align it with the bottom hole. Glue around the edge of the bottom piece and press the top piece into place. If the foam feels too thick along the edges, shave it down gently with your craft knife. Flip the joined foam piece and match it with the remaining half sphere. Fitting the raised areas into the recessed areas so they lock together. Nice! Glue the seams all the way around to secure. Now, brush on some white glue. Just cover the base with paper. Choose a small piece of paper for the top. First the top, then the middle, and finally the base. Cut a scrap piece into a rough circle. And glue it over the very bottom, so no white foam shows through.
可以给它折叠之后剪一个圆形。好。
For this part, you can use straight white glue without water,
少量多次的
applied in thin layers.
糊一层就好了。
Place one piece at the
中
center,
间位置，
and then smaller strips around it. The same, each piece is brushed with white glue. The smallest pieces go at the top, medium pieces in the middle. They are roughly triangular shapes at the top. Just cover it. When you glue them on, fix the upper edge first, letting the paper stand up slightly above the foam, about 5 centimeters of height.
不要贴住它，就这样直接立起来。
Then smooth and press the lower edges against the foam.
整理平整。
So we finished one piece, so the same as the other 3. Brush with white glue, and then cover it.
可以和之前的这一片这里重叠一点。
For pieces 4 in the first layer, we finished the first layer.
参考一下。
For the second layer, glue the paper in between the seams of the first layer, so the edges cross over.
同样涂好白胶，直接这样贴上去。这个时候注意一下，
This layer should sit a bit lower than the
之
first.
前的要矮一部分。
Again, attach the top edges loosely, then press the lower part flat against the foam. Repeat for the middle layer, dropping the height a little more. The second layer finished. The final layer uses the largest pieces. Glue them on slightly lower than the previous layer. Letting them overlap and stretch a bit to create
一
volume.
样涂抹好白胶，
Brush extra glue wherever needed. The final layer uses the largest pieces.
贴的时候注意一下，它像一个三角形。
They look like big triangles with a curved edge at the top.
还是一样的，依次低一点。
Glue them on slightly lower than the previous layer. Tuck any excess lower edge paper into the foam. Brush extra glue wherever
刷一点
needed.
胶等一下。
Tuck any excess lower edge paper into the
不
foam.
要折叠在泡沫里面去。
Now the big bulb base is complete. Cut long strips of crepe paper about 5 to 8 centimeters wide.
长条，剪的这个宽度可以宽一点，5到8厘米左右都可以。
Take the aluminum
把
plastic
这个铝
tube.
书管拿出来，收到的时候
Gently
它是一个
straighten or curve it
圆
into
的
the
手法
shape you want for your
自由
stem.
的这样调整一下，给它整理直。
Now, wrapping the tube with the paper.
刚开
Press
始
the
压住
crepe
它
paper down firmly for the first few turns. Continue wrapping. At the end, add a little white glue and press the paper to secure it.
粘贴上去。
Any extra sections can be wrapped in the same way. Now let's make the leaves. Take the green paper for leaves. I'll demonstrate with this green piece, but any color works with the same technique. Fold along the existing crease lines to split the sheet into 2 strips. Folding each strip lengthwise, then cut a gentle curved shape along the diagonal, forming a simple leaf outline. A simple leaf outline has been finished. Flip and repeat on the other side, cutting another curve across the middle and out to the edge. Nice! Unfold to reveal the basic leaf shape. Next, add texture. Fold the leaf again and gather the paper with your hands. Pressing in from both sides to create fine vertical creases. Grab the top and bottom ends and twist gently in opposite directions. You can use a bit of pressure here to set the twist. Unfold partially. Don't open the leaf completely. We want the vertical lines to stay visible, so they look like natural leaf veins. Take a piece of 18-gauge wire and place it down the center of the leaf. Apply a line of glue to fix it in place. The wire doesn't need to align perfectly with the top of the leaf. Leaves about 10 centimeters of wire extending from the bottom. Add more glue and fold the paper over the wire, closing the leaf and hiding the wire inside. Press the lower section to seal it, then pinch the center lightly. The same, add more glue and fold the paper over the wire, closing the leaf and hiding the wire inside. Open the leaf just enough so it looks natural, and that completes one leaf. Makes about 4 leaves in total. Now we're ready to assemble everything. Insert the aluminum plastic tube into the foam base. Push it down firmly so it feels stable. Add the finished leaves at different heights around the stem, pushing their wires into the foam. Finally, slide the giant flower head onto the top of the stem. Press down gently, but firmly so it sits securely. Adjust the flowers and leaves. And that's our giant grape hyacinth paper flower.